Arguably, one of the most epic scenes within the entire hit series Breaking Bad is when Walter White is looking into the eyes of mass murderer, gang leader, and drug distributor Tuco Salamanca, and he says,
"You got one part of that wrong. This is not meth."
"You got one part of that wrong. This is not meth." And he proceeds to throw what is in fact in his hand mercury fulminate. A primary explosive, and what I would like to submit to you in this video, my entire goal is to not only apprise you of the incredible depth and breadth of the problem that is the fact that this is not water. This is bullshit. This is incredibly toxic tap water that is riddled with myriad unnecessary additives, pharmaceuticals, not least of which. We'll delve deep into the depths of what it actually does contain and what is, in my estimation, the only way to proceed. Frankly, what I deem to be the only way to actually render the aforementioned incredibly toxic tap water actually fit for human consumption. And by my own admission, this is actually a recent evolution in my own self-actualization journey. And I've actually got the receipts to show that. I'm logged into my Amazon.com account right now, and I'm going to be showing you some frank, embarrassing purchases that I've made, in fact, not too long ago, so that you realize there's not such a big gap between you and me. I used to drink the tap water. I used to drink what I thought was doing me a service, Brita filtered water. And if maybe that describes you right now, you're drinking from the tap, maybe from the well water, you're drinking Brita filtered water, or even, so importantly, you're drinking water which is at the often espoused upper echelon of what is possible within the context of water purification, i.e. RO. You're drinking reverse osmosis water. This video is going to show you step by step an alternative to all of the aforementioned. Buckle up, because we are going down the rabbit hole on this one, my friend. And what I'm going to do firstly is I'm going to pull up this graphic. And what this shows is not only painting with broad strokes, showing you the dirts and silts, the microbes, parasites, the VOCs, very importantly, volatile organic compounds and chemicals, but also within each of these broad strokes, the finer details of what they contain. And what I would like to bold, italicize, and underscore is the fact that some of these chemicals, like chlorine, are very pro-oxidative. Some of these are toxic heavy metals like lead, mercury. We have a known neurotoxin, fluoride, which is leaching into the municipal water supply, and at least 50 pharmaceuticals that get excreted, metabolized by one's kidneys. They go out into the municipal water supply and they circulate back into the hands of the end user, who are haphazardly consuming this, unknowing what they've signed up for, not knowing that it's not in fact meth, it's mercury fulminates that is going to explode inside their body. And that's why this is all that you'll ever see me drinking. And we'll talk about in this video, and I'm actually going to show you in real time. I have a video pre-recorded how I go from this to this, the most molecularly purified water that is possible to confer on planet Earth. Before closing this graphic, very importantly, what I need to highlight is that, and maybe you'll be able to intuit this, there's actually one thing that is arguably the most concerning that is found in tap water and bottled water alike. that's actually not displayed here. And maybe you've become acquainted with the recent publication in early March from the New England Journal of Medicine. I'll actually bring that up on screen now. The finding of this, very disconcertingly so, is that they found micro and nanoplastics in arterial plaque. Now, on the one hand, there could be a lot of fear mongering. That's certainly not my goal. I just want to arm you with this information because it is the case that they did find this. The problem here is not whether or not plastics are causing these plaques to form, but rather, in my mind, this opens up Pandora's box and it makes me wonder, where else could they be found? And this study here would suggest that they can be found in the cerebral space. This study here showed that in mice, at least, these micro and nanoplastics are crossing the blood-brain barrier, literally the body's #1 defense against harmful chemicals entering the brain. This is what I find incredibly disconcerting, not just the fact that it's found in plaque, but in my mind, the question that necessarily gets begged is, where else is it found? And so the most potentially problematic aspect of tap water that's not shown here are micro and nanoplastics. And I've got a graphic that shows some of the primary sources of ingestion of such, which would suggest that drinking water is in fact the primary method. You see number 2 being shellfish, and we'll talk a little bit later about why that is, and it has to do with the hydrologic cycle, the water cycle. But the fact that modern seafood is so high in these microplastics that are just bioaccumulating in them, just like they bioaccumulate in humans, is one of the reasons why, and I'll pull up on screen, I had purchased, you see back in February 23rd of last year, 10 pounds of Redmond real salt. And I would suggest too, if you happen to salt your food, that you look into a salt that is known to be low in these microplastics. And the reason that I trust Redmond real salt is because they actually extract their salt from an ancient salt deposit, which I have a picture of in Utah right here. And this is known to be much lower in these problematic microplastics. And now moving along to my personal progression and, by my own admission, recent evolution in this space. I'm going to pull up a picture of the apartment building that I moved into here at the tail end of 2019. And to my credit, although by no means does this put me off the hook, I was a bit distraught at this period in my life. It was the turn of 2020, and I was just coming out of a 3-year long-term relationship. And just emotionally, I was in a really bad way. And my way to build myself back up was to make certain purchases, which I thought were doing me a service, but rather were actually doing more harm than good. And this is a building that, if I pull up the Zillow link, you'll be able to see was built in 1941. I will highlight that right here. And the problem with a lot of these old buildings, and I suggest you do your own research, although the landlord of the building that you may be living in will have a legal obligation to apprise you if that building has leaded pipes. Now, the fact that this building had leaded pipes was frankly just scratching the surface of the consequences that I had to contend with. And I have 24-hour urinalysis toxic heavy metal screen results to show you, both before and 16 months later, that I think you'll find incredibly eye-opening. But what I'd like you to do is to pull up the EWG. This is the Environmental Working Group website, ewg.org/tapwater. And I'm going to play along here with you. And I'm going to enter the zip code of this residence, of this 1941 constructed building, which for me happened to be 04330. If you live in America, you can follow suit, put in your zip code, and you will have to further delineate which actual water district. So I'm going to Control F keyword search for greater. It was the Greater Augusta Utility District. They serve 15,040 customers. If I go into there, what I can see is that there are 15 contaminants that were detected that are in excess of the EWG upper end of what is deemed acceptable by the EWG. And what I would submit is that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I like to err on the more cautious side. I don't think there's any safe level of arsenic, lead, mercury, not least of which. But let's scroll down, and I think you'll find this incredibly insightful and illuminating when we look at my actual urinalysis. This is something that you cannot unsee. The fact that 850 times the upper limit of what is deemed acceptable was found in the water that I had been drinking. Okay. In addition to 573 times what was acceptable for radon and 4.3 times the upper end of acceptable uranium levels. Now, let's delve a little bit into, frankly, some embarrassing purchases that I had made that I thought were going to address some of these problematic components of tap water. And what we can see here are just a number of purchases that I had made that I thought were actually doing me a solid, not least the Brita Extra Large 18 cup Ultra Max water dispenser and filter, BPA free. If you go to Amazon right now and just type in Brita filter, let's see the results that get rendered here. And let's see if we can actually replicate this purchase that I had made. So we see here a 5-star, 97,535 times reviewed Brita filter. This is incredibly alarming because if you then go to Google and you type in Brita filter pore size, Brita filter pore size, and you expand this question here, is Brita a 2 micron filter? What you'll find is that Brita, the trademark logo, filters use technology that cannot be effectively measured with a micron rating. Brita filters are not intended to purify water. Let me say that again. Brita filters are not intended to purify water. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not exactly the impression that I got when looking at the marketing campaign that Brita puts out. Just the fact that it's marketed as a filter would suggest to me that it should be filtering water. No, it's total nonsense. And I'm about to pull up some urinalysis screens that would suggest that what I'm saying is indeed the case. So if I pull up from January 31st, 2022, just real quick before I do that, this is just unbelievable. You cannot unsee this. This is the exact product, by the way, that I purchased on January 20th. 50,476 reviews at that point in time. Very favorable, mind you. Very misleading, as is this graphic here from Brita, which is taking toxic bottled water and further potentiating problems in a Brita filter. Because what I had done when I had this, and I finally got clued into this, is I used a TDS meter, total dissolved salts. And what I found is that the end result was actually higher than the initial product, the initial already toxic tap water that I was expecting to become filtered. I'm going to pull up this urinalysis screening. And what I'd like to highlight in particular are some of the aforementioned from the environmental working group, such as arsenic. Now you see that I'm in the what they deem to be the safe range, this company doctors data, but I'm roughly in the middle of that range. Roughly 16 months later, I did a follow-up screening. And here are the results of that. So for arsenic, you can see I went from the middle of the range to the very bottom end of the range. Now let's oscillate back to the initial testing and let's look at lead, which was borderline red zone. So at the very top end of the yellow range. And if we go back 16 months later, we can see that my lead level was down to the middle of the yellow range. Let's go back and let's look at mercury. This was into the yellow zone. So I went from into the yellow to 16 months later, middle of the green zone. And then lastly, we saw the issues with uranium being in excess of the upper end of acceptability. And you can see, fair enough, I'm in the green zone, but I'm roughly, let's say, 7/10 of the way to yellow, whereas afterwards, it's virtually undetectable. And I hope, if nothing else, this inspires you as to what is possible. So if you've been drinking from the tap, drinking well water, drinking Brita filtered water, if you actually implement and follow the steps that I'm about to lay out, you too can decrease your burden. And this is just a trajectory, by the way. This was July 2023. My trajectory is continuing to improve. The number one way to detoxify from these harmful additives is to stop drinking them. And to drink, without further ado, distilled water. This is the number one thing, arguably, that I have done for my health. Is on April 27th, 2022, you can see the receipt here, I had purchased a Mega Home water distiller. This is a company that I had vetted ad nauseum, and I'm actually going to pull up my Gmail account right now. And I'm just going to scroll through these back and forth messages. There's literally 18 of these that I'm scrolling through now, just to show you that with a fine-tooth comb, I really did properly vet this company. And one of the things that I was vetting for was to make sure that their distiller had a gas vent. One of the things that neither distillation nor reverse osmosis effectively addresses are volatile organic compounds. We're talking about things like formaldehyde and benzene, which are notoriously difficult to filter out. Okay, not only is the Brita filter not addressing VOCs, certainly not, it's not addressing pharmaceuticals, fluoride, arsenic, the most dangerous of toxic tap water additives. And so what I want to do is give you a little bit of a primer on distillation, because if you're anything like me, you may have never heard of this before, or maybe you've heard of it before. Oh yeah, distilled water, people use that in their CPAP machines, right? We have an epidemic of people who stop breathing overnight. They have oftentimes undiagnosed sleep apnea, their airway is collapsing, and their doctor will recommend to use distilled water. But you've probably never heard about someone who actually has one of these distillers in their own home. You've heard about people buying it from the supermarket in plastic containers, which are leaking myriad aforementioned microplastics. And so you've probably never been acquainted with what this process actually entails. And I'm going to pull up on screen a graphic of the hydrologic cycle. This is the water cycle. And what this is showing is nature's process of distilling water. Snow and rain are Mother Nature's distilled water. This is a process that has been ongoing since the beginning of time, ostensibly. And it's a process that takes the 71% of the Earth's surface, which is covered in water, by the way, in excess of 90% of that being attributed to ocean water. And what the sun is doing is enacting on that water, evaporating it, having it condense into the clouds, and then come back to us in the form of, for example, rain and snow. This process, this natural process that nature engages, is the exact process that a water distiller is effectively emulating. And what I would like to do is show you a graphic, show you an actual picture of the disconcerting leftovers of distillation. Because in contrast to what most water filters do, distilled water takes good and bad, and it's merely evaporating at 100 degrees Celsius, the good, the actual water that we want, and it's leaving behind all of this nonsense. I think once you see this, not only can you not unsee this, but it's going to motivate you to actually engage in the process that I do every single day in the other room. I have a water distiller that I use every single day, and I have a video that's going to show you the exact step-by-step process to do that. But before we delve into those details, what I want to address is the fact that reverse osmosis gets pedestalized. And look, the goal of this video isn't to wage a war against people who use RO filters. I actually admire people who have household RO filtration. That's something that I personally aspire to, because unfortunately, one of the things I'm being exposed to now is in my shower, not having a reverse osmosis setup. And so I think in the context of washing your dishes, taking a shower, reverse osmosis is impeccable. But to be perfectly honest with you, if I had even the creme de la creme of reverse osmosis filters, I would not consider that a water distiller substitute. And I would still take that RO water and I would put it through my distilled filter. And I hope what I'm about to show you will explain why. The first study here is from 1991 in pediatric dentistry. And the major finding of this study, titled "The Effect of Point of Use Water Conditioning Systems on Community Fluoridated Water," is the fact that they found that when comparing activated carbon filters to reverse osmosis to water distillation, they found that 81, 84, and 99% of fluoride was filtered from these three aforementioned modalities, respectively. The takeaway from that is that you're only getting 84 as opposed to in excess of 99% fluoride filtration. And the truth is, this is really nasty stuff. So what fluoride does is it attracts calcium. And so maybe your dentist before has talked about the benefits for your dentition. And look, that's good and well in a topical sense, but when you have systemic fluoride in your body, it actually does the same thing. It attracts that same calcium, except it does so in your arteries, leading to the calcification of such. And that's to say nothing of your soft tissues. What about your tendons and your ligaments too, which are going to be attracting the calcium when fluoride is present, leading to their respective calcification? This is a known neurotoxin and it has no place in the human body. And this one study alone would be enough for me to opt for distillation. But let's go a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole too. And let's look at this study, which corroborates that finding, which is titled "Effect of Different Reverse Osmosis Water Filters on Fluoride Content of Drinking Water." And what I would like to draw your attention to is this table that I'm scrolling down to right now, table 1, titled "Concentration of Fluoride in Drinking Water Before and After Filtration." What they did is they compared 10 different reverse osmosis setups, some of which having TDS controllers, total dissolved salts, having UV, in addition to RO. And here was the finding: mean reduction in parts per million. Look at this column right here, showing a range as poor as 50.37% to at best 84.62% fluoride filtration. In my very strong opinion and conviction, this does not cut it for me, and I hope you feel the same way. But if not, let's delve even deeper and let's look into what is one of the other most harmful substances in water, arsenic. And with this graphic bolds, italicizes, and underscores is the inter-individual variability of reverse osmosis systems. They're BS, because if you look at some of these data points showing pre and post arsenic concentrations, you can see appreciable mitigations in some of these 18 systems that they tested in the state of Nevada. But you can also see others that were not particularly appreciable. The take home here is that this is so important. The inter-individual variation of reverse osmosis systems is far greater than of water distillation because of the difference in the process, the technology, the system, the fact that vapor distillation is emulating the hydrologic cycle. It's a better system than relying on porous membranes, which, by the way, no one's probably told you this before, but they're comprised of, at least in part, polyamides, which are a type of nylon. RO systems actually leach additional micro and nanoplastics that weren't present in the initial tap water into the final product. And it's something that you have to be very wary of because, again, these bioaccumulate. And the headline here is that vapor distillation actually gets rid of anything that boils at above 100 degrees Celsius, including all known micro and nanoplastics. And that need be understood if you're currently on the fence and you're weighing your options between reverse osmosis and distillation. Again, I'm not trying to fearmonger here. And if you currently do opt for reverse osmosis, it is leaps and bounds. It's in an entirely different league than any of the aforementioned Brita filters or bottled water that you can opt for at the store. But I would recommend going all of the way and opting for vapor distillation. I've got a few more studies here that corroborate what we've already established. This one here from 2006, reverse osmosis filter use and high arsenic levels in private well water. The conclusion here was that these findings provide evidence that RO filters do not guarantee safe drinking water, and despite regulatory standards, some people continue to be exposed to very high arsenic concentrations. The study here, effectiveness of household reverse osmosis systems in a Western US region with high arsenic in the groundwater. After examining RO systems here in 59 different households in Lahontan Valley, what they found was that the sampling results indicated an average of 80.2% arsenic removal. Again, this isn't even vaguely appropriate. This does not cut it. And the final nail in the coffin is this study here from 2002 titled Removal of Arsenic from Groundwater Using Point of Use Reverse Osmosis and Distilling Devices. What they did was they compared 3 different RO devices to 2 different water distillers. And what they found is that only one of the 3 RO filters were actually able to render the water fit for human consumption, with the mere benchmark being that it was able to lower the arsenic below the upper end of what was deemed safe for consumption. Again, I don't think there's any safe level of consumption, and this study here corroborates the efficacy of distilled water, which showed that the 2 distilling systems that they used had 99% arsenic removal. Again, given the choice between a low-end water distiller and a high-end reverse osmosis filter, I would still opt for the former. And now what I'm going to be doing is showing you the water distillation process step by step, because it's probably something that you've never seen before. And I have a video here showing you exactly how to do this in practice day to day. So what I'm doing here is I'm just taking the base of the distiller and I'm simply filling that up with tap water. I'm using cold water here. If you wanted to use warm water, it actually may save you a little bit of electricity. So if you don't pay for heat, feel free to use the hottest water setting. I'm putting on the top of the setup right now, getting it plugged in. And once the electricity comes through the outlet, it will power that fan and it will begin. I've got this set up to a digital timer. You can use either that or an analog timer and set it to the amount of time with a buffer at the end, ensuring that it doesn't run dry. So the electricity is coming through now, it's powering the fan, and it's starting to distill. And what I did was a time lapse here, which you'll see in just a second after I put the glass collection vessel underneath the spout at the very end. This is a time lapse here showing you, in this case, a 3-hour time lapse. The unit that I'm using distills about 1 liter per hour. You'll have to find out what the rate of distillation is for your unit. And again, set your timer to cut the electricity so that it doesn't run dry, because that's where all of the impurities are found. That is the TDS meter that you just saw me using a second ago, showing the 0 parts per million results. And here I'm using just a little bit, maybe half of a tablespoon of citric acid powder. This is the best natural cleaning agent. And I'm just adding just enough tap water to form a really concentrated solution. This is going to save you a lot of time, energy, effort, and electricity. A lot of these companies will have you fill up the entire basin and heat it with the top off for an hour. This way, you're not even heating it. You're just taking, albeit a little bit of tap water. It doesn't matter though, because you're putting in the citric acid powder and it's really concentrated. And as you saw, I took the sponge and I'm just coating the walls of that distiller. I'm just gonna let that sit for 10 minutes. And then I would go back and just clean out the bottom and then rinse it with tap water. It's okay to have tap water in that unit because that is the entire point. That's what you are going to be distilling. This is something that I've become so passionate about that I actually, in just a minute, will show you a video of me setting up my grandma in her apartment with this setup. But what I'd like to do firstly is put on my headphones, and I'd like you just to hear how quiet this system is. One of my friends, Maxine, actually recently, I feel really good about this, took my advice and she actually bought one of these units, and she's in the process currently of setting it up. But one of her concerns was, how loud is this going to be, right? Maybe you've got some housemates, even your family members. You don't want to perturb any of these individuals. So this is going to show you that this is a pretty quiet, benign setup here. So you can see the water droplets coming out. What you're hearing is primarily just the fan. And it's quite quiet and really portable and doesn't take up a lot of space on your countertop. So this is a video here of me delivering the distiller to my grandmother. And I'll pull up a video too of us getting it all set up for her. Because again, she was using something similar to a Brita filter, thinking that was doing a solid because the 50,000 5-star Amazon reviews suggesting that it would actually do something. It's total nonsense. It's total trash. And I hope you take this seriously. I hope you literally trash your Brita filter right now if that's something that you are currently using, or anything similar that promises appropriate water filtration. It's absolutely not doing you a solid. And what I'd like to do right now is address a few of the concerns about water distillation, because maybe you've heard, oh, it's going to make you mineral depleted. The osmolarity is low. It doesn't have the necessary micronutrients that you need. Briefly, what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to log into Chronometer, and I'm just going to show you my dietary log from April 1st. And what you can see here is my mineral intake. Over 1,300 milligrams of calcium, over 250 milligrams magnesium, 3,200 milligrams potassium, almost 2 grams, that's 2,000 milligrams of sodium. The point being here that you shouldn't be relying on your water intake to provide the necessary micronutrients. And I'm going to pull up a calculator here just to really hammer this concept home. So each liter of blood has between 135 and 145 millimoles of sodium. Let's average that out and just say 140. And if we take the molar mass of sodium, that's 22.99 grams per mole, which is the same thing as milligrams per millimole. So we get the millimole units to cancel. If we multiply those out, 140 times 22.9, the units that we're going to be left with is milligrams of sodium per liter of blood. 3,200, 3.2 grams, 3,200 milligrams. What I want to put into perspective is the fact that 1 liter of the most natural, pure, impeccable spring water has between 10 and 20 milligrams of sodium per liter of water. And so the fact that distilled water doesn't have any is honestly irrelevant in the context of blood, which is so greatly concentrated in sodium. And if you've heard of a condition called hyponatremia before, low blood sodium, this is if you are intoxicated with water. And frankly, this can be a fatal condition. But what I want to highlight is the fact that if you drank too much water, if you intoxicated someone with water and you made them drink several gallons in a small period of time, for example, hyponatremia is going to be the downstream consequence, whether or not you're drinking tap water, spring water, bottled water, or distilled water, because of that considerable difference in the concentration gradient of the sodium that's in blood versus in water. And so it's a completely moot point. The fact that water from a distillation device is effectively devoid of these minerals But look, if you're on the fence and you're really sold on this idea that distilled water is not good for you, what I would recommend doing is, again, if you're on the fence, just adding a pinch of salt to the final distilled product, or finding an electrolyte solution, or taking a fresh lemon and squeezing that into the water if it really means that much to you. Personally, I've been doing this for a number of years now. My friend Luke, who by the way authored an article that you can check out at alphaactualization.com. This is a really streamlined, sanitized, how-to tactical guide, just the no nonsense, everything you need to know in written form. You can put in your email and stay tuned for weekly content, weekly articles that are going to drop on Friday nights at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Luke, the author of those articles, has been drinking distilled water for 10 years. And in a few minutes, I'll be showing you other anecdotes of people who have been doing this for much longer and whose health is, quite frankly, impeccable. But before I do that, I also want to bring up the fact that within the scientific community, what is the gold standard? The gold standard is distilled water for a reason, and reverse osmosis is not used to conduct scientific studies because it's just not good enough. And look, again, if you currently have RO, that's great, and it's leaps and bounds better than the vast majority of other options on the market. But honestly, if you want to go all of the way and have impeccable water supply for the rest of your life, there is no better option than a stainless steel water distiller into a glass collection jar. And one other thing that you're going to want to consider is getting one of these activated charcoal distiller water filters. And they come in a sachet, but it's really important what that is made of, because if it's made of microplastics and nanoplastics, again, those are just going to leach into your final collection vessel. And so you want to get something like this product here, which very importantly is a sachet that is comprised of natural coconut shells. This is the best deal that I found for $49. You can get 50 of these. You may want to use between 1 and 2. So each of those will last about a month or 30 gallons. This is honestly one of the best things that you can do to further improve your distillation result, because these will help offload those volatile organic compounds like benzene and formaldehyde. But ideally too, get a unit like the Mega Home, which has specific gas vents to off-gas those before they're getting into the final yield. One quick website that I want to run you through is showing third-party testing results from a water distiller showing 99.9% removal of all contaminants. And this is really just to hammer home, to put a final nail in the coffin of the fact that RO really does not light a candle to water distillers. This is showing 99.9% removal efficiency, which, by the way, just to clarify, is just leaving a margin of error for the testing devices. So they can't claim it to be 100% officially because the instrumentation isn't absolutely impeccable. I mean, this is really high-grade equipment that they're using to quantify each of these additives. They've really left no stone unturned, including Bacillus subtilis, a type of microorganism, bacteria specifically. They're including all of these inorganic chemicals. We can see things like arsenic, which frankly RO really struggled with, fluoride, both of those 99.9% removal. I'm just going to scroll down so that you can see and appreciate the considerable breadth of the testing that they conducted here. Uranium, cesium, all of these organic chemicals. They literally left no stone unturned, and you can see 99.9% removal of all of these, including herbicides and pesticides. I find this to be really compelling, as I do some of these anecdotes from a video that I'm about to pull up here from Dr. Eric Berg. So these are anecdotes that I'm just going to read through, just showing people who have been doing this for a prolonged period of time. This commenter here says, when the WHO and CDC make claims that distilled water is dangerous, I know I'm on the right track of drinking distilled water. Somebody else says, I've been drinking distilled water on my own since 1985. So many people have said that I will get ill from it because it has no minerals. My skin looks very clear, and when I see what I take out of the boiling tank after distilling water, I am shocked that all that sediment would have gone into my joints and arteries. Someone else says, I've been drinking distilled water for 47 years. I'm a picture of perfect health at 74, not a trace of arthritis. Many people who have followed my advice also have great results. Somebody else here says, I've been drinking my own homemade distilled water for over 6 years. After you boil your first batch of water and you open the chamber to clean and refill it, what you will see and smell will make you a lifetime water maker. I can confirm, and I'm sure if you do this for yourself, you will see exactly what cannot be unseen. Somebody else here says, I started making distilled water at home using a countertop machine about a month ago. The change in my skin happened within days. It almost glows. Somebody else here says, old plumber I worked with for 10 years always told me to never drink tap water. He always drank distilled water. And lastly, a couple more comments here. In order to put minerals back in distilled water, somebody says to add 1 pinch of Celtic sea salt in every glass of water. And that's certainly something that you can do. By the way, I currently don't do that. Sometimes I will dilute my pomegranate juice and I will drink that intra workout between sets. So I'm getting some of the electrolytes from that. But for the majority of the time, I'm drinking just straight distilled water. And in confidence, I would advocate for that as well. But again, if it makes you feel better, feel free to do that. This last comment, very interesting. You are so right, Dr. Berg. My cat was not looking good. Her hair started to look matted. I changed her water from tap. Her water bowl would have a blue ring to distilled water. And after drinking distilled water, she looks about 8 years younger. I feel good when I drink distilled water. Yeah, so literally, Luke's girlfriend, Cheyenne, has a cat, Mabel, who, frankly, she had been feeding tap water to. Okay? And when I found that out, she actually spent a few nights over here. I was like, look, this is total nonsense. You got to get her on distilled water. And so I gave her a glass jar of distilled water that I had made. And I said, look, take this home. Let's give it to Mabel right now. And ever since, Mabel refuses to drink the tap water because, again, this is not water. It's something approximating the mercury fulminate that Heisenberg throws in the presence of Tuco Salamanca. It's something that is going to combust internally, maybe not today, tomorrow, or the following Friday, but in time as it bioaccumulates and rears its ugly head. I hope you take this seriously. And the last thing that I want to show you is this recent study, which is showing that the amount of microplastics we are being exposed to, frankly, might be orders of magnitude more than what we imagined. And so it says here, we successfully detected and identified nanoplastics from major plastic types. Micro and nanoplastics concentrations were estimated to be about 2.4 plus or minus 1.3 times 10 to the fifth, which is about 200,000 particles per liter of bottled water, about 90% being nanoplastics. The thought that I would like to leave you with is bearing in mind the fact that the porous membrane of a RO filter not only itself contains things like polyamide, a type of nylon, but also is sufficiently porous to let pass a number of nanoplastics. My question is, what else have we not detected? Is it possible that we have plastics at the level of picometers, 100, 200 picometers that we haven't even discovered yet? Again, the fact that over 90% of their findings were nanoplastics would suggest that these are breaking off into increasingly smaller and smaller bits. And the fact that water distillation addresses this should be reason enough for you to invest in one. The fact that our seas, our oceans are becoming increasingly polluted with these microplastics tells you that they're being left behind from nature's natural distillation process. The water cycle is evaporating this water and it's leaving behind the microplastics that are bioaccumulating in seafood, not least of which, and ending up in the sea salt, the table salt that maybe you're serving for dinner each night. This is a very serious matter, and vapor distillation is something that is going to leave behind all of those micro and nanoplastics, which, by the way, have a boiling point far in excess of the 100 degrees Celsius that water boils at. I love you very much. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Drop a comment down below. Are you going to get a distiller? If so, which one? Do you know anybody who currently uses a distiller? Are you going to get your grandma tuned into this? This is something that I'm incredibly passionate about, and I hope you are too, and I hope you reap the same rewards that I have. Again, I love you very much. Check out alphaactualization.com. This is literally a cheat code for life if you are even remotely serious about leveling up in this life as a man. That string of letters and characters is nothing short of a cheat code that will bring you to a map that is ever expanding. As I said, every single Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, there will be an additional piece of that puzzle just for you. I love you very much. And until next time, my friend, find your freedom. Peace.